Hello to the Horns Diaspora podcast listeners. I am your host, Marga Jonas Bula. I'm back with our second episode on the Horns Diaspora. The Horns Diaspora podcast discusses major unfolding events in the Horn of Africa that concern members of the diaspora communities. It also entertains the stories of people whose achievements are contributing to both their homelands and hosting communities. Today, I have with me Sami Omar. He was born in Sudan in 1978 to Eritrean parents and grew up as a child of German parents in Ulm, Swabia, here in southwestern Germany. He is the author and moderator. So as author, he is known for his work on the topics of migration, integration, racism and discrimination. He has been contributing dozens of articles for print and online media. In 2018, he wrote his third book titled Sami und die liebe Heimat, which is translated as Sami and the Beloved Homeland. We will get to that later in our discussions. He also appears as a speaker and trains people on the topics of migration, integration, racism and discrimination. Besides all this, he moderates political and cultural events as well. There are many more to say, but let's welcome Sami and get to our discussions, making his latest book as a springboard. Sami, welcome to the Horns Diaspora.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Good. Just as I mentioned earlier, we will start with your latest book. I've read it, which is titled Sami und die liebe Heimat. The English version of it is Sami and the Beloved Homeland. You started your writing of the book with your experience in Thuringia, a state located in the center of Germany. You asserted that, I quote some of it, I am a German, my skin is brown, however it works. They will have to accept it. When I became a German, Helmut Schmidt was federal chancellor. I was a German when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. However, I cannot move freely in this country, which is my homeland. What do you mean by that? You cannot walk freely in this country. Why is that so? Let's start with that.
Okay. Why? Well, why is that? See, I was brought up in the 80s and was a teenager in the 90s in Germany. As you said, in Swabia is where I grew up, in a town called Ulm. And I was a black child with white parents. I was always aware of the fact that, at least in my life, the concept of belonging cannot be based on things like ethnicity and genetics. But especially in the 90s, after the reunion of Eastern and Western Germany, neo-Nazis and right-wing groups have tried to build a common German identity on whiteness, on the category of whiteness and the idea of German blood. And that led to terrible violence and murder, and people were hunted, and a sense of fear spread out amongst people of color in Germany. Mm-hmm. Also, I think it has made us aware, us meaning, people of color and black people, and it has made us aware that the threats that we were exposed to in society were very vivid and directed at us individually. And though I visited the DDR, the Eastern Germany, before the reunion throughout my childhood, quite a few times in the 90s and early 2000s, I've overgeneralized my fear of Eastern Germany to be, thinking of it as unsafe for me to be there. Mm-hmm. And my texts that you mentioned aimed at exactly this feeling. The thing that I speak on it in the book is that I, as a German of African descent, I can not feel less secure in parts of Germany, than other people. Those people being white people. If I am, in the same sense, a citizen to this country and belonging to this country, I have to feel the same sense of freedom, given to me as a member of this society and someone with a German passport. I am free in a legal sense to go wherever I want to, but I don't enjoy the same level of security, and I haven't felt that. So if this is my country also, I have to insist on my movement to be free and unlimited as it is for any white person in Germany.
Your book also focuses on the issue of homeland. Let's get to that. On the issue of homeland, there might be some people who I guess might be thinking that Sami is our Horn of African son, and his homeland is here, not Germany. Would you enlighten us? What does homeland mean to you?
Well, I am a child of refugees. Yeah. So, no, not even. To be exact, I am a refugee. So, when I came to Germany, I came to Germany not with my biological parents. So, I was, I'm not even, a child of refugees. I am a refugee myself, first generation refugee. So, Homeland or Heimat, as it is in German, is a concept that was forced upon me. I did never choose to think in this category. I chose to think in the category of belonging. So to me, homeland is a feeling that builds a sense of belonging out of memories and warmth and love, and these kind of emotions. And the aspect of memory is linked to time, So the time I spent in Germany allowed me to create an identity through the love of my parents and the experiences I made and all those things. So I guess in this sense of belonging is one that builds over time, as memories accumulate. Good ones and those that are less pleasant, but it sets a foundation somehow. So this is a sense of belonging. The sense that is wrapped up in the concept, in the word of homeland or Heimat, is a controversial one because it is always connected to something that in a public discussion or in a political sense is something that is occupied by white people who claim to be genetically linked to Germany rather than through a sense of belonging. And I am there very much for this sense of belonging being a criteria that is very individually linking you to wherever you want to be linked to. This is a matter of personal freedom to me.
You mentioned identity. From academic readings, there are two ways of identification. Like you mentioned, through time you accumulate memories and find yourself in a spot where you can self-identify yourself. I am this. But there are also other people who externally identifies you. No, Sami is that. So there is this friction between self-identification and external identification. I think reading from your book as well, what matters is the self-identification, how one identifies herself or himself. The problem of external identification is not limited to you or here in Germany. I remember also, for example, back in 2013, Jawar Mohammed, an activist turned opposition politician and who returned from the US to Ethiopia in 2018 and now in prison, said on Al Jazeera's The Stream that he is an Oromo first and Ethiopia is imposed on him. Although this is not the first time that the Oromos have been self-identifying this way, however, Jawar's assertion has created a great uproar from those who don't agree with his assertion, both offline and online. I just want to ask you, where do you think this denial against self-identification emanates from? Here in Germany, in Africa, elsewhere?
Well, that is a huge question for me to answer, and I don't think I can do this in a satisfying way. But you see, I think throughout the world, I hear that people don't have a longing to define themselves where they belong. In several countries, there are struggles over these matters. In societies like ours, like the German, there are people who have not chosen to come here, but have been brought here by their parents, who may have been refugees or come here for work, and these things. And if these are people who are becoming part of society throughout time, then there is a phase in life, puberty mostly, where you normally learn about yourself and get, to enjoy the freedom to define yourself in a way within the boundaries that, society sets for you, being, those that define you as men, a male or a female, and these things that we're also trying to decategorize and try to loosen a little bit, so people can, be defining themselves in these perspectives also. But I think it is preserved as a threat to, one trying to define themselves is preserved as a threat to those who want to build unity in a nation on a concept of blood and genetics, and categories like this, categories that have always been working to create and divide people and create a unity within one group. So anyone who allows themselves to define, to decide for themselves who they want to be, or who they are in society and in their own life, is a threat to this attempt to formulate society as a group of humans that are, the same as far as color of skin and their descent goes. As long as human beings try to bring unity by exclusion, through exclusion of parts of other parts of society, there will be no real unity. Because there are always others suffering from being excluded from this sense of unity, because it will always be built on the disadvantage of others who are essentially us, people who are being excluded by the same people who are on the inside. They're all human. So if you exclude some of them, you're excluding yourself, because you are them and they are you, essentially. So we're harming ourselves. In racism, this principle was met by a workaround. Historically speaking, the workaround was that in colonialism and in slavery, you would go and say that black people and indigenous people and people of color are inhuman, are more animals rather than human beings. And so in that sense, when you enslave them and harm them and kill them and so forth, you are not doing this to yourself, because you're not doing it to human beings. Yeah. So I think I don't know where I started this thought, so I don't know what I think. This is the point I was trying to make, is that this is a new time and a new understanding of identity, and it could, if we are persistent, free us from the mechanisms that have oppressed and divided humanity for so long.
And I expect also more, because we are having more refugees here who will later find their home here and also self-identify as they wish. So the issue is going to remain on the table. Talking of refugees, since 2015, there are unprecedented number of refugees from the Middle East, like from Syria and Iraq, from Central Asia, like Afghanistan, and from the Horn of Africa, like Somalia and Eritrea. Still, there are people who are trying to get to Europe, particularly to Germany. In that year of 2015, Muti, by the way, this is how Chancellor Angela Merkel is referred to informally. It means simply mother. She said, "Wir schaffen das," again meaning we can do this. Almost 6 years from then on, after such a statement was uttered, hat Deutschland geschafft, has Germany did it or succeeded?
Has Germany succeeded in dealing with the refugees, so to speak?
So to speak, yeah.
Well, I think the premises is quite false. I think there's a great misunderstanding or misuse of what Angela Merkel has said. I believe that she said "Wir schaffen das" in a manner of motivation and encouragement, and people, especially people, right-wing people and neo-Nazis and extremists have held her to this as if she has made a promise. What she was really saying was, let's stick together and it'll be a piece of cake. We can deal with it. And people in, great parts of Germany, in German society, they did stick together and they have dealt with it wonderfully, with people and their needs wonderfully. So, it is a bit of a manipulation and a misuse of this quote to hold her to it as if she has made a promise that she will manage to achieve for everyone else. This is, the dealing with the premise of this. The question was never whether a rich and diverse country like Germany would manage to become home to people who come to Germany for security and prosperity, even if often moderate, in the beginning. The measures that are now being taken against the consequences of the corona outbreak, for example, are proof that Germany is doing quite right, all right in an economical sense, and as society, in spite of all the racism and the hate that is being spread, this is still a quite decent place to live at. Once you've become a part of it, is when things like constant racism and hate really become part of your everyday life. But before that, you are, a little better off than you were before, hopefully. And then when you become part of society, you have to deal with the problems that you're facing when you are a part of society. So you could say being part of the discussion and being part of also the difficult sides like racism and things like that could be proof that you have become part of society almost. And I'm happy to see that more and more Germans are starting to discuss these topics and even fight over them, because it means that it is undeniable. Diversity has become an undeniable reality in this society, and it's much of a given, more of a given than something that is being created at the moment.
I will come to the problem of diversity later. I just want to ask, in your book, which carries 18 articles against indifferences and racism, you have pounded on the concept of integration. Even one of your title reads, "Do not forget the longing, hypocrisy of the debate about the will to integrate." Today there is a concept of inclusion in the stream of academic circle as a substitute, I think, to integration. What is your take on the difference and similarities between integration and inclusion?
Well, Well, inclusion wants you to be part of something as an equal. Inclusion is the attempt to live among others as an equal of them. The differences exist between individuals, exist as a part of the normal variety of human life rather than criteria for distinction. So disadvantages that individuals have in comparison to others in society, in an ideal sense of inclusion, will be respected when planning and designing social structures and public life, and so on. That is at least the idealistic thought of it. We're far from that, but as a dream, so to speak. But it will be a great step forward if we worked more towards this idealistic thought. Becoming a part of society through integration, in comparison to in opposition to inclusion, is often more meant as assimilation. Meaning that people are meant not to live their cultural aspects of their personalities that differ from German. The idea that German politicians often describe as Leitkultur. Leitkultur is the idea that there is a common pool of cultural characteristics that make a German, that make a German identity, and it's not defined. It is not defined. Nobody tells you what it is. It's like the carrot that's held in front of you that always moves once you move towards it. And you cannot achieve to be German in a sense of Leitkultur because nobody has defined it. It's not described. It is existent only to exclude those who are considered aliens and foreigners, and to protect German culture as a concept that is very fluent and undefined, and not belonging to anyone. No one can say we know and define what Leitkultur or German identity is, because it's not a given. It's not something that has been written down anywhere, though people try to find proof of it in historic scriptures and so forth. But it's a fluent, even a national identity is a fluent thing, and Leitkultur is something that right-wingers and extremists, try to insert in discussions about identity and try to fight what we are trying to achieve, which is inclusion, an inclusive sense of, German identity.
Diversity is another marketable concept, both in media and academic circles today. I think, especially after the Black Lives Matter movement, this topic has got also priority in different media and academic area. That is only my observation. Because there are concerns that people of color or ethnicity or those who have other identities are not represented at workplaces equally as their counterparts. There are media houses, business companies, and government institutions here in Germany who have built also thousands of departments trying to have diversity in all aspects, mainly focusing on people of color and to some extent language. In your opinion, how do you see this diversity issue at media and other institutions? Are these institutions succeeding or failing in establishing it? I'm not expecting them to do it overnight, but is it a positive move forward, or is there some stumbling?
Well, it's both of it. There's some stumbling and there's moving towards the right direction. I think the focus is sometimes a little off. Diversity is a fact. in the world that is often being treated as if it were something that has just been invented or discovered. What is truly being discovered when talking about diversity is white patriarchy in society, and white predominance, that is only becoming visible in confrontation with diversity. So to speak, when white people are confronted with the diversity around them, they understand that they are white, which they had now to face before being sharing spaces with people who are not white. Mm-hmm. So I am happy about all this talk about diversity, and I try to be part of the conversation in a professional sense. I'm consulting companies and organizations in this matter. Currently, I'm working with Google Germany on the topic of inclusive language, which is a great experience for me and hopefully for them too. The tough part of every organization trying to deal with this matter and do it in a good way is the reflection on themselves in the matter of racism, which is sometimes being excluded from and divided from the matter of diversity, and that's simply not possible. Racism is a great part of it, and you can't talk about diversity without talking about racism, and you can't talk about racism without facing your own position in this matter. So they're unbelievably linked in this discussion, and in order to lead this discussion in an honest and clear way, racism has to be part of it. And this is what some companies don't like to face and don't like to deal with, because it's not something that is advertisable.
When you say not advertisable, it's not something that they won't take action on it, but they might promise in their corporate responsibilities and so on, but in reality, in practice, it is not doable. That's what you mean.
Well, America, you would have to go out and say, in order to talk about racism in an honest way, you would have to go out and say there is racism existent among us. And what companies and organizations like to do is, we are against racism, to state that they are against racism and that racism has no place with us. Racism has no space here. But as long as they're part of society, and as long as there are people working in these companies and organizations and structures, there has to be racism, because racism is weaved into society. So what they really would have to do is to say, we acknowledge that there is racism amongst us and we are part of it, and we don't want to be no longer. So we are taking hard looks at ourselves and try to work to make ourselves better. Mm-hmm. And that's what's not very advertisable, because the message is something that starts with a negative and works towards a positive. And advertisable would mean that you would always communicate a positive first. From a company point of sense, you would have to convince these people that it is worth the work and the effort, and there's something risky but very prosperous behind this message that there's racism among us and we're trying to work with it. And people like us, people of color, black people in society, we would appreciate it far more if these matters were dealt with in an honest way, and maybe we would even become the better customers to these companies and organizations.
Let me get back to your book and talk on something very interesting you mentioned there. In the title, Rommel and I, About My Socialization with Racist Heroes, you stated that you used to have a list of well-known people, including Rommel, Hannah Arendt, Martin Luther, Hegel, Voltaire, and Immanuel Kant, which you have removed them later from the list of your heroes and heroines. The closest person some people I know relate to from all of your list is to the Desert Fox or General Field Marshal Rommel.
Rommel.
You know,
yeah.
Yes, because he was in Africa fighting on the side of Italian and in Libya against the British force in Egypt. In my view, I could guess that there are people back in the Horn who might not know who Rommel is, or Hannah Arendt, Martin Luther, Hegel, Voltaire, or Immanuel Kant. And there are also some who knows, and for example, Immanuel Kant, until I came to Germany and trying to experience from other colleagues and classmates while studying, never knew the dark side of his work. Was only focused on how he enlightened the world through his work. And what are the reasons, briefly, that made you remove them from your list?
Well, first of all, I think I have to be honest here and say that I was terribly over-exaggerating about what I have read and whose work I have known. You know, Hegel, Voltaire, Immanuel Kant. Obviously, it sounds great to name them and to pass on the impression that I have read their work and I'm familiar with it, which is not the case, really. But the point I was trying to make is that education in Germany is and was made by white people for white people. And that is something that is only slowly starting to change, thanks to the actions and the persistence of people of color within the German educational system. Many of the icons I was taught through my education were people. So I found that had they known me, would have considered me an animal rather than a human being, and that's documented in their legacy, and it's not been taught to me in school, because my education was simply not designed for me, was not designed with respect to me as a black child. So in a society diverse as ours is today, that leaves out huge parts of people's realities, and that has to change. It's the Eurocentric white perspective that has to widen and include. We're back to inclusion again, include more people who are not white and have not been included before. And that's the point I was trying to make, really.
Well, I think those topics, diversity, inclusion, racism, cannot be covered in this short episode. Also, it's going to need more time, more debates, and I think we have managed to raise and deliberate on some part of these topics. I really thank you. This is just from my side. This is what I have. Is there anything you want to add?
Marga, I love your podcast. I hope it will be a great success in the future. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sami, for sharing your thoughts, expertise, insights for the Horns Diaspora audience. For those of you who haven't read Sami und die liebe Heimat, or the English version Sami and the Beloved Homeland, never miss to get a copy of it. I would also love to hear or read your response on YouTube channel and on Facebook under the Horns Diaspora. Please also do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Until I get back to you with the next episode, I would like to say goodbye for now.